I'm Abby Clausen at Advertising Age, and this is the About Digital Report. Today we're looking at a Twitter marketing entrepreneur. Greg Gallant is a former associate producer at CNN.com and the producer of Venture Voice, an audio podcast service reporting on digital entrepreneurs. As a result of an early interview with Twitter co-founder Evan Williams, he became a user of Twitter long before it went mainstream. And in 2007, he and two partners launched SawHorse Media to organize various sorts of Twitter content into standalone editorial products. These include Musebin.com, which aggregates Twitter music reviews, Muckrack.com, which aggregates the real-time Twitter output of the country's leading journalists, VentureMaven.com, which aggregates the tweets of venture capitalists, GiantRedCarpet.com, which pulls together Twittering celebrities, and ThePetFeed.com, which follows animal-related twittering. SawHorse also recently published the $795 a copy Shorty Report. This is a study of how big marketers are using Twitter for customer service, direct sales, and PR crisis management. But the Brooklyn-based SawHorse is best known as the organizer of the Shorty Awards. In February, that event generated national publicity as it honored the best creators of 26 categories of Twitter content.
We started SawHorse to make sense of one-line content. What we saw was that Twitter is this amazing platform that's gotten lots of people to create this short-form content, but it's still very hard to make sense of. You sign up to Twitter, it's hard to figure out who to follow there, hard to find the good stuff. At the same time, we had this idea to figure out who is doing the best job twittering about any given topic. So who is kind of the best beat covering news on Twitter, or the best beat covering politics or advertising on Twitter. So we launched the Shorty Awards to do that. It just took us 2 weekends to build. We just launched it and threw it out there. We didn't have any PR or marketing campaign for it, and it took off within 24 hours. It was the top trending term on Twitter, ended up getting us lots of attention. New York Times, Wall Street Journal, ended up with Rick Sanchez, the CNN anchor who's been twittering, being our host, and MC Hammer at the event. The Shorty Awards were profitable for us. It was modest, but it was nice to see that the Twitter environment is strong enough to support something like this. The Knight Foundation was our main sponsor. They provided travel grants so that we could reimburse everyone, all the winners who came to the event, $1,000 for their travel to get there. And then we had other sponsors involved, like Pepsi and PR Newswire, that made it an event that that was viable and sustainable for us to do it again, bigger and better next year.
What was the most interesting or surprising thing you learned from running the Shorty Awards?
Really, the most interesting thing was that kind of the level of passion that people had. All the votes had to be public, all the votes had to have a reason. So it was really a strong outpour. We learned some interesting things. One was that the number of followers you have on Twitter isn't really a good indicator of how good your brand is or how good your connection is, because a lot of our winners weren't the people with the most followers. In our books category, this Twitter feed called FWL Books won, our flashlight-worthy books. The idea is it highlights great books that are flashlight worthy that you're going to stay up at night reading. It's really a great little business that they built that lets them highlight different books. They kind of tease it in 140 characters, and the really interesting thing is that it's kind of created this new opportunity for them, that it's not one of the more established publications that covers books winning this award. It's someone who's kind of really embraced the Twitter media, figured out that exactly kind of how you have to craft messages on Twitter to be effective, which is very different than how you'd craft a message for traditional media.
As more and more marketers become interested in Twitter, what's the biggest challenge they face in terms of using it effectively?
The biggest challenge with Twitter is that right now you can't just throw money at it. So kind of the typical way that you do a marketing campaign is you come up with your idea and you figure out how to spend a large budget on it. Most companies or agencies are staffed with just a few people to spend a lot of money. Twitter's the opposite, where right now it's very hard to spend money on Twitter. Twitter, the company won't even take your money. And at the same time, to really engage a lot of people on Twitter, you need human beings to be on Twitter, to be reacting to people on Twitter, to be posting content. So it's kind of flipped the marketing challenge on its head. Everyone's trying to figure out the model of how agencies, consultants, other service providers should be charging for their Twitter services. Because on one hand, it's just so easy to set up in the very simple sense, whereas a blog, you had to install a content management system and do a bunch of work. With Twitter, you choose the avatar, you choose the username, and you're good to go. At the same time, though, there's a lot of challenges with Twitter where it takes a lot of time to really engage on Twitter, to listen to what's going on Twitter. And then there's also a lot that a big company has to do to figure out what their policy is going to be on Twitter. Are they going to let hundreds of their employees, thousands of their employees get on Twitter? How do they monitor that? How do they kind of coordinate that? So, because of that, we're just seeing it's kind of all over the board right now. No one really knows how to kind of box up Twitter and where in the marketing mix it fits.
Many people in marketing and media wonder if their companies can really expect to make money with Twitter. And what kinds of metrics should they be using to make judgments about whether it's really worth it or not?
It's definitely possible to make money on Twitter. The question is, how exactly do you track it? So, there are some direct examples, like you look at Dell, who've claimed to have made over $1 million in revenue, and they can actually measure that because with Dell, it's a real product that you're buying. You're carrying the discount code with you. But with a lot of other companies, it's less obvious. If you look at other media, right, like if you look at Apple, what's the value of doing their keynote? Their keynote events have immense value, but you can't really track it in a traditional sense. Like Comcast has been able to measure how many customers that they've helped, and out of that you could easily calculate how many of them you've probably saved as customers, and then what's the lifetime value of a customer. Same with Whole Foods. When you're directing customers to go to a store, you're giving them the knowledge that a certain store is open, or a certain store exists, or a certain store carries a product. You can count up how many people you've helped. You can kind of multiply that by how many people are following them and how many friends they have. In addition to followers, which I mentioned isn't a great metric, there are metrics like how many people are retweeting what you're writing, how many people are responding to your Twitter account. And then even with or without signing up for Twitter, you can easily count up every time your brand is mentioned. You can then kind of calculate that out and figure out on a given day how many positive mentions are you getting, how many negative mentions are you getting on Twitter, and then how does your presence on Twitter affect that ratio of positive to negative comments.
Back to the money. Who are some of the marketers who are using Twitter in a way that's generating significant product sales or other types of revenue?
We're seeing a lot of direct sales on Twitter. On a large-scale version for products, we're seeing examples like Dell is the obvious one. Then for a lot of more niche services that involve, especially ones that involve a lot of education, one interesting example is FreshBooks and now Quicken too, where they're actually using it to address people on Twitter who are talking about taxes, talking about their finances, talking about business issues. It's not in an aggressive way, but just in terms of educating consumers about what their product is. We're also seeing lots of businesses now that are being predicated upon Twitter. One is StockTwits, where it's a vertical site all focused about stocks, but wholly built on Twitter. And they've been able to raise between $500,000 and $1 million so far in angel capital. They're just coming out now with the revenue model, so it'll have yet to be seen if they can be a vibrant, profitable company on it. But it's definitely a company that's posted great metrics, that's gotten investor support, and is showing a lot of promise on Twitter.
And that's it for this About Digital report. Thanks for being with us. This is Abby Clausen at Advertising Age in New York.